Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Maulana Muhammadin wa alihi wa azwajihi wa zurriyatihi ajma'in. We are continuing our reading of Allama Iqbal's Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. And we'll just read from here today, although we had covered this bit, but just to keep the continuity. Allama Iqbal is talking about the Quran and the empirical attitude and science and all that stuff. So, no doubt the immediate purpose of the Quran in this reflective observation of nature is to awaken in man the consciousness of that of which nature is regarded as a symbol, sign, or what we call in Arabic and Persian, in Urdu, alama. But the point to note is the general empirical attitude. Now, as far as we can see at this point, by general empirical attitude, Allama Iqbal means observation of nature. But obviously, in philosophical term, empirical attitude is something different than observation. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point. So, general empirical attitude of the Quran, which engendered in its followers a feeling of reverence for the actual. Ultimately made them the founders of modern science. We did cover this, we did talk a bit about it, but let's go through it again, because it's important. Now, Allama Iqbal here is saying at least 4 things. The first is, Quran has something he calls general empirical attitude, okay? And by this we mean observation of nature, or observation in general, emphasis on observation. But as Allama Iqbal himself says, that observation is thrown upon as a sign of something else. Number 2, he's saying it engendered in its followers a feeling of reverence for the actual, feeling of and by actual, I guess he means physical reality, laws of nature, etc. Now, first thing to note is, even if Quran emphasizes observations, from this it doesn't follow that it actually engendered a feeling of reverence for the actual in its followers, because just the possibility of connection doesn't mean the actuality of occurrence. So we need more than that here. On the other hand, feeling of reverence for the actual exists among pagans more than anyone else. So that was something already there. So Quran could not have just come to engender that feeling which was already there. And thirdly, Quran again and again emphasizes the fleeting nature of this reality, existing reality. So that doesn't gel with the reverence of the actual. Now, if by the reverence of the actual we mean that it's a creation of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and it is His trust, and as His creation, as His trust, uh, that's something which we should take into account. So that's fair enough, but that doesn't mean we have any reverence of the actual beyond that. And if by reverence of the actual we mean that Islam emphasizes and commands that we take into account cause and effect, because the whole way of life is based on taking into account cause and effect. But it also teaches us not to rely on cause and effects. So that's a double attitude. So that's these two things. And from this, Allama Iqbal draws the conclusion that it made them the founders of modern science. Now, even if we accept the first two premises, that the Quran inculcated a general empirical attitude, and number two, feeling of reverence for the actual, even then, it is a non sequitur, as we say in logic, to claim that they are founders of modern science. It doesn't follow from the first two necessarily the third one, because you will need to prove the first two, and also would need to prove that it actually led to the third, and also prove that that third is actually empirically sound as well. And obviously, Muslims are not founders of modern science by any stretch of mind. In fact, I mean, if I have to pick up a religion, that would be Catholicism, which led to the foundation of modern science, in the sense that without Catholic institutions and its system of learning, it was impossible that in Europe we would have a modern science. But that doesn't follow from Catholicism or its essence. It's what you call the side effect of the Catholic civilization of the Middle Ages. And in order to happen, Catholicism itself had to be weakened as well. So it's not any praise for Catholicism to say that it contributed to modern science, as far as I'm concerned. But more than that, I think it's a great misunderstanding that science was the consequence of some sort of empirical attitude which didn't existed before, observation, etc. Because empirical attitude and observation is with human since the dawn of our history, and those were the main tools for our life and survival. So if science was actually sufficiently based on empirical attitude and observation, it would have been emerged in pagan cultures, for example, in ancient Greece or other pagan cultures, in Egypt or in Arabia. But science, despite all this claim that is based on observation and empirical attitude, science requires, apart from observation and empirical attitude, which any human pursuit for knowledge presupposes, science actually is based on very counterintuitive and non-observational culture. And counterfactual culture. And without the emergence of this counterintuitive, counterfactual, counter-observational rationality or way of thinking, science would never have emerged. Because we never actually observe law of gravity as described in science, or law of motions as described in science. You have to actually abstract from the existing realities. Abstraction is very important because abstraction is part and parcel of counterfactuality. You have to abstract from actual reality in order to develop science and scientific laws. And in fact, as against what Allama Iqbal claims, science actually thrives on non-reverence of the actuality. Because without non-reverence of the actual, science would not have developed. So these are the observations at this point, but we will talk about these things as we go along. It was a great point to awaken of Quran, according to him, to awaken the empirical spirit in an age which renounced the visible, of no value in man's search for God. This is the most mind-boggling claim, because I don't know which age he's talking about. Is he talking about Arabia? I'm sure that's totally wrong about Arabia, pre-Islamic Arabia. You just have to read their poetry and read their sermons and all that. Read about their lifestyle. I mean, their whole life depended on the visible, and the focus on sharp, razor sharp focus on the visible. How can you survive in a desert with that? That just shows you even great minds can. Because when you focus on certain things, you necessarily ignore certain other things. So every great mind has their black holes. So that's why it's important not to take yourself very seriously, including me. So, and obviously, I think it's not true about Middle Ages. It's not true about Egypt. It's not true about Iranians. It's not true about Indians. It's not true about ancient Greek. So it's not true about Hellenistic age. So I don't know which age he is talking about. According to the Quran, as we have seen before, the universe has a serious end. Yeah, sure. It is going to finish. It is going to end. That's the serious end. Its shifting actualities force our being into fresh formations. It's shifting actualities force. Okay, so there is a jabra, there is a determination, there is a the intellectual effort to overcome the obstruction offered by it. Now he keep talking about obstruction in his Hegelian way, but as I have mentioned before, I mean, I don't deny that reality offers resistance to our will. That's something obvious. But that doesn't mean that that's the main way we should see or we do see a reality. Because if you read Quran, what you see again and again is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned one of his great bounties is that he has overcome this obstruction for us. So Quran doesn't see it as obstruction as such. Quran see it as a reality which has been tamed for you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you and to test you. So I think it's totally un-Quranic attitude to see the world around us as abstraction per se. So it's shifting actually the intellectual effort of overcoming the obstruction offered by beside enriching and amplifying our life, but it enriches our life because it's it's useful. Amplify our life because it's useful for us. Sharpens our insight. That's not necessary. Some people eyes are sharpened by this observation. Others just ignore the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no necessity that it will sharpen our eyes. It will sharpen our insights, and thus prepare us for a more masterful insertion into human experience. That's not necessary either. We have to make an effort for everything. So, reality in itself doesn't lead anywhere. You have to have a right intention, right perspective, right set of mind, right view of the reality, and right view of what you are seeking for, etc. It is our reflective contact with the temporal flux of things which train us for intellectual vision of non-temporal. Well, it might be a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. We don't even know whether there's any non-temporal reality or not. We don't even know what does intellectual vision of non-temporal means actually. Reality lives in its own appearances, and such a being as man who has to maintain his life in an obstructing environment again cannot afford to ignore the visible, of course. But it's not an obstructing environment. In fact, it is one of the main assumption of a non-Islamic way of thinking, especially a modernist way of thinking, that the life in this world has developed through overcoming these obstructions. So seeing the environment, the world around us, basically obstruction. But we as Muslims don't see it as fundamentally obstruction because we are all creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that sense, it's whole harmonious world in us, because we are all linked to the same principle. The Quran opens our eyes to the great fact of change. I mean, the Quran is full of wonders and all that, and it's kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we don't need to go through the Quran to see the change around us. That's something which we are born with. Through the appreciation and the control of which alone is it possible to build a durable self. Through the appreciation and control, controlling the nature, controlling the But control mentality is not the Quranic mentality. Nafa, yes, with caution, and appreciation, yes, shukr, but not control and durable civilization. There is only one civilization in its true meaning, and that's worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some, this observation leads towards that durable civilization, but others don't. The cultures of Asia, and in fact the whole ancient and world, failed because they approach reality exclusively from within. That's also a gross generalization, as if he is reading a specific version or understanding of the Hindu civilization and, projecting it to the whole world. Even it's not true for Hinduism. What does it mean that we approach reality exclusively from within? Where else we are going to approach reality from, if not from within ourselves, and move from within outwards? I mean, I can only see from my eyes, and my eyes are within me, aren't they? So this is, it seems to me, I mean, I might be missing something deep, but it seems to me a bit of a joke. This procedure gave them theory without power. Theory without power. And no mere theory, no durable civilization can be based. Yeah, if by theory means that, you just philosophize and don't do anything. But we don't know any civilization which did that. It's just a caricature of any civilization to say that their civilization or non-civilization was based mainly on theory, and they didn't consider power or control or use or practical implications, etc. Anyway, let's pause here, and we'll continue from here next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.